All right, everyone, we're back. We have Daniel Thatcher. He is he's rerunning. He's seeking
Re-election.
to be reelected into Utah State Senate seat 11. And we met Daniel. Well, I met Daniel first time at the Lincoln Day dinner, and an impressive guy with an impressive boss. I have to throw that out there. She, you can tell
She's
that
the boss of everything.
Yeah, you can tell that she runs the show. Now, Daniel, we're going to have you choke into the microphone. Come in real close.
Roger that.
And just go ahead and pull the microphone up to the edge of the table. Sit comfortably. And tell us about the stuff you got going on.
Tell us about you first.
Yeah, tell us about you.
Yeah, so let's just start with this. First off, I first ran 12 years ago to a seat that was mostly Magna and West Valley. A little bit of the West Bench of Salt Lake County, west of 56th.
So very safe neighborhood, no crime at all.
No super rich people, very wealthy. But the senator who represented that area at the last redistricting, his wife wanted to move to Stansbury Park. And so in the last redistricting, they looped in Stansbury Park, which at the time only had a couple of houses.
It was kind of a gerrymander. They stretched it out a little bit so the senator could move.
They did, and so that was in 2000. So 2010, I'd been involved in politics for a while, and there was an issue that came up where they were raising the tax on cigarettes. Now, I don't smoke. I don't like smoking. I hope you don't smoke. I think smoking is terrible. But about half the guys on my construction crew smoked. And they wanted to raise the smoking tax by about $3 a day. And here's the thing. It's easy to do because only 7% of the population smokes, and they're all, well, typically they are low income. And
they're addicted.
They're addicted, yes, but they're low income and they're not typically politically active. And so you raise the food, you raise the cigarette tax by $3 a day, you're probably not going to get a lot of pushback. Except for me, because I stuff like that bothers me.
You stood up for your cats. I like it.
I stood up for the guys that work for me. Here are guys that are lucky to be bringing home $30,000 take home. And we're now going to raise their taxes. Let's see, $3 a day is $1,000 a year. Because we don't like what they're doing. Because we don't like cigarettes.
I've always wondered. Do you think that cigarette tax was the government trying to disincentivize a loan? Or do you think it was the government trying to say, hey, there's kind of a pot of money out here we can get our hands on? A little bit of column A,
a little bit of column B.
That's kind of what
and a little bit of column C. I'll tell you why I think it's column C. I think it's because they're not sympathetic. No one's going to stick up for them. And so we can fleece them.
It's a target that
there's
target-rich
three different things. Number one, nobody's going to stick up for them. Number two, they're low income. They're typically not sophisticated, so they're not really going to have a political presence. No one's going to lobby for them. Right? And they get to pretend, hey, we're doing it for their own good. If we tax it, maybe they'll do it less. And
I'm sure that was an honest feeling in their mind that.
Well, I'll tell you
that's how you go to sleep at night.
Yeah, the one honest piece was the argument that we're going to take those funds and we're going to use them for Medicaid. We're going to use them for health care.
Did it work out? Did it happen
for these things? Well, no, they did. They took that money and they put it to medical care, and they put it to anti-smoking campaigns, which I appreciate. And at the end of the day, I went to my senator, who at the time was a Democrat, and I said, look, this isn't right. It's going to hurt people in your district. And his response to me was, well, we think it'll get them to quit smoking. And I said, sir, do you know any smokers? Like, they're addicted. People don't give up smoking because it's more expensive. They give up other things. Like these guys it's going to impact their ability to put food on the table for their kids.
Yeah.
They are not going to give up smoking because they are addicted. And he said, well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree. Now, that in itself...
It's a good answer.
It's fair enough.
Disappointing.
That's a political answer I like
irritating.
To hear.
But it was honest.
But, well,
I mean,
I would argue that it was ignorant.
Yeah.
I would argue that it was an ignorant answer. It was an answer from someone who didn't understand the consequences of their actions. And that has been one of my guiding principles as a senator is first, do no harm. Okay? If my actions will cause injury to others, maybe you don't do it.
Man, we were just talking about a show that we're all commonly enjoy and the very last episode of that. And I like the sound of that from a politician, do no harm. Anyways, we're, side
yeah. Harm can have definitions that differentiate between party lines, though. I mean, he's thinking, if they stop smoking because I jacked the price up, I'm doing no harm to them.
Right, but if he knew more about addiction, if he spent time talking to people who wish they could quit smoking, then he would actually understand what he's talking about.
Damn near impossible.
Right.
It's hard.
Right.
Usually it takes a life-altering event to get people to quit smoking, such as cancer.
Yep.
Such as late-stage emphysema.
Yep. So the second time that I had an issue was actually over. There was a single mom in my area who had a son who had just been diagnosed with autism. Well, no sooner did he get diagnosed with autism than his charter school kicked him out for being a disruptive influence. Now, I don't know if you know this, but you can't do that. That is totally illegal. You cannot kick someone out for having a disability. Well, the way that they justified it was they kicked him out before she provided them proof of diagnosis. So they didn't kick him out for being autistic because they never received proof that he was autistic.
And what happens after they receive proof? After,
Well, she went and said, she went and said here, and they said, sorry, he's not a student. We can't take that.
Oh, they washed their hands.
Now, you see where that's clearly not okay. But here's the problem. She didn't have an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a charter school. So who do you go to? You go to the charter school board. They don't care. Let me rephrase that. They didn't care in this particular case. Nobody was going to help her. So I went to the senator and I said, please help this woman. And he said, that's not my problem. That's now twice that I've gone to you and asked you to care.
May we ask who the senator was?
I'm not going. It's not like you can't Google it. I don't want to throw stones. He's retired.
Okay.
I helped a little. But the final straw was when Salt Lake County did the police fee. And I don't know if you guys remember that at all. But in 2008, we had I guess it was 2009, we had a pretty bad recession. And people had less money, people bought less stuff, government had less money, less tax revenue coming in. And so everybody had to tighten their belts, except Salt Lake County. So Salt Lake County used to provide law enforcement services for Magna, Kearns, and Copperton. So, the super rich areas with lots of disposable income.
Yeah. That's when they had the metro system they had running.
So what they did was they pulled all the funds out of the law enforcement, used that to backfill shortfalls in other areas. And with the money that was left over, instead of putting it back, they gave everyone raises.
Raises are good.
And then passed a budget that had $0 for law enforcement. And then they told everybody, you have to pay a fee.
Was this Salt Lake that did that?
It was Salt Lake County. Salt Lake County. And so here's the thing. I went to the senator and I said, look, they can't do this. Like this, a fee is for something that you request. A fee is not for an optional service, right? You can't opt out of police service. So it can't be a fee. Well, by calling it a fee, they bypassed truth and taxation laws. They bypassed lots of different safeguards, lots of different protections. Calling it a fee allowed them to charge nonprofits and churches, which is direct violation of Utah state constitution. And I went to him and he basically said he didn't care. And so I went and I did his job for him. And I pulled up the Utah Procedural Budgeting Act, which defines and differentiates what's a fee and what's a tax. And clearly this is a tax, not a fee. Therefore, you have to follow these rules. So what you did was illegal. And here's the section of the Utah State Constitution that you violated. And I brought it back to him and I said, will you please help now? And he said, look, that's not my problem. Now, this was the third time I had asked him for help. This is the third time. Now, again, I'm a Republican. He's a Democrat, but he's still my senator.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to solve problems for your constituents.
How long had he held that seat?
So he had only been in the Senate for, I think, six or 7 years, but he had been in the House for 20 something. So he had been in the
So he had
legislature
moved
a
up
long
through-
time.
Okay.
He had been there almost 30 years, and so I said to him, look, you say that's not your problem. Well, then what is your problem? And he said, well, right now my problem is you. And I said, pal, it's not, but it's about to be. And I told him right to his face, I'm going to run against you. And he laughed because here's this 33-year-old kid from the wrong side of West Valley, this construction worker telling off a sitting senator. And it was an area that hadn't elected a Republican since Bill Barton back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
There was zero chance of winning. It was plus 12D on a generic congressional ballot. Nobody gave me a snowball's chance in hell.
And you took it.
We did, yeah. We had a really, really good campaign team. We had 100 volunteers just out there knocking doors. I wore out 3 pairs of shoes.
Oh, I bet there's a lot of guys in steel-toed boots out wandering around. Some Red Wings and...
Well, we did a really, really amazing thing. And right after that, they redistricted and they took away a significant portion of West Valley and gave me Tooele. And so, there were some folks that were pretty unhappy. They wanted Tooele to have their own seat. They wanted Tooele to be the center of a seat. But, redistricting is complicated. You can't always get things the way you want. And so the promise that I made 10 years ago when they redistricted me into Tooele is, look, I will always be there. You call me and your problems are my problems. You call me and I will, I'll be there.
Well, here you are on a humble Tooele-centric podcast. So, yeah.
Well, look, at the end of the day, I just want to help people. I want to save lives. I want to diminish human suffering. But I want somebody who's looking out for us.
Well, I want to say this. So you went in, you went to your senator on behalf of guys you worked with.
Yeah.
Guys that would have probably never went in front of the senator themselves because they probably feel like they don't have a voice anyway.
Yeah.
Most construction workers don't care about politics.
Well, they honestly, most of it's probably they don't feel like politics cares about them.
That's a good point.
And they'd be right.
Construction is a forgotten,
and they'd be right outside of my Senate district.
Yeah, and then you went to bat for a mother in your neighborhood. You went to bat for all these people, and then that senator at the time finally showed you that he wasn't going to represent.
Yeah.
So you stepped up and did it. I honestly, as a guy who works in the trades myself, think that we need more construction workers in politics. We need less lawyers and career politicians. I think we need more guys that have calluses on their hands.
Well, let's be clear. There are people who are going to say that I'm a career politician because I've been there 12 years. Well, let's just be clear. If you want to talk about somebody being there too long, there are freshmen that have been there too long.
Well,
there are guys in their first year that have been there too long.
Yeah.
And there are guys who were there for 30 years that left too soon.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I miss Lyle Hilliard terribly. He was wise. And it used to be funny. He used to always, people would propose laws and he'd say, well, I remember back in 83 when... and he would remember the history of how we got where we were. And so I personally do not believe that term limits should exist outside the ballot box. I know that's not always a popular opinion. People think, oh, term limits are great because then you rotate people. Look, you should rotate the people who aren't getting the job done and support the ones that are.
I'm big for, especially lately, and this, no offense, and this isn't directed at you, obviously, but we need to start washing out incumbents because federally mostly, we've gotten into a hell of a mess. Of course, the state has,
AOC is getting the job done for someone. It ain't us, but she's getting the job done for.
I don't think she's getting the job done for anyone.
I think you're right. Here's the thing: is there are performers. There are performers, right? There are people who go up there to get attention. We used to make jokes about certain of my colleagues, and I gotta be careful not to trash my colleagues because I still got to work with these guys. But there are jokes where the most dangerous place in the state is between a certain legislator and a camera. There are people who will run bills specifically because they know it's sexy, they know it will get them on TV. I'll just tell you right now, I try my hardest to stay out of the news. I just want to solve problems. I just want to fix stuff. And so I'll tell you, back in 2013, I got a phone call from a dad in Tooele who, single dad, 15-year-old son, woke him up in the middle of the night, 2:00, handed him a noose and said, "Dad, I have been up all night trying not to kill myself. I don't even know what's wrong. I'm so unhappy all the time, and I just wish I were dead, and I don't know what to do." I mean, just imagine, like if you've got a wife, thank goodness you got some backup. Now imagine being a single dad. What do you do? What do you say? How do you answer that? So he just grabbed his kid, pulled him into bed with him, and just hugged him, and they just cried all night long. So he got up in the morning, took him to the hospital, waited. When the doctor finally came in, the doctor said, "Bring him back if he hurts himself," and sent him on their way. Now, things are better.
A teenager hurting themselves usually ends up in a teenage male hurting themselves is a pretty extreme event.
It's
like you don't go visit a doctor after that. Teenage males are extremely successful at attempts.
Here's the good news. The good news is things are better now.
Good.
Right? And so typically you don't hear things like that anymore. Typically there's more awareness, there's more education, there's more we're starting to do a better job of treating people that are struggling. We're starting to do a better job of recognizing it's not weakness of character. It could be literally a million different things.
Well, can I throw something out there? I think boys are forgotten about in our society lately. Boys are expendable. Our education system's built around educating girls.
Well, it's educated by girls too. I mean, most teachers
it's built around
female.
Everything. The way education is ran, it's built around educating girls. Boys are forgotten about nowadays. If you've got sons out there, I'm sorry to say it, but boys are expendable.
Well, this dad happened to know me, and I've said this even before redistricting, when I only represented 3,000 people in Stansbury Park. I would tell anybody in Tooele, look, I don't care where you live. I don't care if you're in my district. I don't care if you can vote for me or not. If you're in Tooele, I will help you. Here's my number. Call me. I'll either help you or I'll tell you why I can't. And so after redistricting, I had Tooele City, didn't have the rest of Tooele County, but same deal. Whether you can vote for me or not, I will still help you. So this dad had my phone number. And so from the parking lot, still just absolutely raging about being turned away when he asked for help, he called me and he said, "What am I supposed to do? Where do I go?" And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I mean, I'm a senator and I don't know. Like, nobody knows where to go for mental health. Nobody knows where to get help. And so I made some phone calls and I found UNI, the University of Utah's Neuropsychiatric Institute, and went up there, met with them, and talked about, how do we make sure people know how to get help? And they're like, well, we have these magnets. And,
You mean like advertising magnets?
Like
Yeah.
bridge magnets?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was on the magnet?
It's
So
their
which
phone- yeah,
generally you
it's
have
just-
to
it's their
become
phone
a
number.
Okay.
patient
Yeah, it's
before
their-
you
it's
know
their-
about it.
It's their phone number.
So it's
Well,
it's
no,
a
they
backwards
they
advertising.
They did some advertising, and some people in the space knew about it.
So after your
But I would
first
say-
attempt,
I would
when you
say-
got introduced to the space, you would find out about this.
I would say we
helpline.
probably weren't doing a very good job of connecting people. By contrast, contrast that with this: the smallest child, if they know what a phone is,
911.
they know how to get police, fire, and ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
Grown adults.
Or as
if
you
you would you actually drop the National Lifeline number?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
What is it?
Isn't it 988?
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
Right now, it's 1-800
All right.
something 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 talk.
Yeah. So you'd have to Google it in order to find out
Yeah,
what
so
it is.
you want
It's
me
not
to
something
drop
you'd know by
some-
Now
heart.
No.
here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. Now imagine doing that while you are in crisis. Imagine doing that when you have lost all will to live. Imagine doing that when you are at the end of your rope.
That
and
reminds
you can't even imagine going on one more second. What's the number?
That reminds me of the British
Why don't you
joke
go
when they
Google it?
changed their emergency services number to like 10 or 12 digits. That was an
it's
ongoing
like-
joke in
it's like
all
30,
British
yeah.
TV. And that's okay,
Yeah, it's a great clip from the IT crowd.
dude. Yep. There's
So that is where, okay, the number is 1-800-273.
All right, let me drop this in there real
right.
quick, and then I want to look up the website. Okay, 1-800. I am
1-800 273 8255, which spells out talk, if you're curious.
Okay, so this is like if you're in crisis, you call this number, right?
Yep.
Okay, now I want to look up the website that you were. What is it? The National Crisis Line?
National Lifeline is what it's called.
And they provide mental help for people who are going through crisis.
If you're in Utah, yes. If you are outside of Utah, good luck if anyone answers the phone. So that is one of the things that we worked on
this it right
here in
here?
Utah. Yep, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
Why do I have to go 3 down?
Because Google.
Advertisements. People pay.
Okay.
Free market, right?
All right. So we got youth, lost survivors, veterans, Native Americans, and Alaska Native disaster survivors, LGBTQ.
Are people
attempts.
seeing your screen, or are they seeing us staring intently?
I will
at the cameras?
share it on there right now.
Sorry, I just
That's a good point. Thank you kindly. All right.
yeah.
They're seeing it right now. So no, this is a good thing to have. And
Yeah, so here's where things came in. So basically, I said, "Look, how do we help you?" And they're like, "Oh, well," and we started talking. And I said, "Look, let me tell you what I want. I want people to know where to get help, because if people get help, they live. It's that simple. I can't stress this enough. If people get help, they live. No one wants to die. They just don't want to hurt anymore, right?" And so we've got to figure out how to connect them with services. And so in 2014, I ran my first bill, and the attempt was to create a 3-digit crisis line number for Utah. There was only one number not in use, and that's 311. And politics got in the way, and it didn't go into law. And so I substituted the bill to instead create a commission so we could bring together the experts in the field in the state of Utah, and we could talk about, how do we tackle the leading cause of death for Utahns 10 to 24? Let that sink in. Leading cause of death for Utahns 10 to 24.
In the age where they're supposed to definitely survive.
So what came out of that was the Safe UT app. And with Safe UT, look, an app doesn't care what the phone number is, right? If you've got an app, you push one button and it, it's really distracting when you pull up the
Oh no, just look at Dave and keep talking.
I should. Okay, let me try. So with an app,
eyes.
it doesn't matter what the phone number is. You literally push a button, and do you see right there where it says start a call? So that's what the page looks like.
That's an outstanding idea. An app on a phone.
This is what I created,
and that's for 10 to 24.
Well, technically, it's for everybody,
but 10 to 24 is an age where there's definitely going to be a cell phone around.
Yeah. So here's the reality. The reality is, look, it took 1 million people to put this together, but this was my baby. This was my vision, beginning to end, which was, I want people to get help. I want people to be able to pick up the phone, push a button, and get help. So if you look, the middle screen there. Is what you see when you launch Safe UT.
So you just open the app up.
You open the app up and you can start a call. You literally push that button and it calls a therapist, and you don't have to know what the number is.
So you can start a chat if you don't want to call someone.
And you two-way text. And I'm sure you'll be stunned to hear this. 20 to 1, they use chat over the calls.
Oh, I'm dang sure at that age, I don't think they know how to talk on a phone. And then you got submit a tip. So
I have literally watched kids text people they're sitting on a couch with.
Dude, I don't know. I sit in amazement on what relationships are going to look like in 20 years with the texting and the OnlyFans. I'm kind of concerned for what the future's going to look like.
So the next thing is submit a tip, and let me just tell you how amazing
if you've got a friend
is.
That's in crisis.
So for submit a tip to work, you have to be registered with a school. So when you first install this, it'll ask you, are you a parent guardian? Are you, parent guardian or educator? Are you a high school or middle school student? Or are you a K-12 student, I think is the question, or are you a higher ed student? So this, if you go to Tooele Tech, right there, the very first thing you see at the information booth is information on Safe UT, like little cards for rolling out Safe UT. It's amazing. It's awesome. And so this program is so successful. We have rolled it out through every single school in the state of Utah, every public school. Let me rephrase that. Every district school, every university, every tech college. There are a couple of private schools that aren't using it yet, and there were a couple of charter schools.
Utah has private schools?
Yep. We had a really tragic loss where one of our charter schools was not using Safe UT based on some bad information from a parent who complained that Safe UT bypasses parents, that we don't want kids using this and talking to a therapist without their parents' consent. Well, look, I'm sensitive to that concept.
This is a life-saving device.
Yes.
It's a crisis, not advice.
Yeah.
Yes, and I literally had someone sitting in a room with me and the mother who had just lost her daughter to suicide, arguing that we shouldn't support this program, that we shouldn't create this program.
The mother who just lost her daughter?
No. So the mother who had just lost her daughter is a friend of mine.
Was in the room with you.
And was in the room with me.
Okay.
When someone came in and was arguing we should not create this program because of the potential that a student could talk to a therapist without parental consent.
That is a whole different, because
and this person made the statement in front of a grieving mother that your daughter is better off dead than talking to a therapist without your consent.
What?
You mean like she actually said that?
She literally said that out loud.
That's so fucked up.
And this amazing woman, without missing a beat, turned to her and said, "Spoken like someone who's never lost a child."
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the end of that conversation.
Yeah, where does it go from there?
I don't see a
do
way.
you as a
I don't see a way to
senator-
resolve that.
Do you stand up
Kind of.
and yell at her and point out her idiocy?
No, I think what you do is at that point you just say, look,
You just-
we're not going to see eye to eye on
You've
this.
hit an impasse.
I agree to
personally-
disagree.
Look, I'm pro-life. Okay, I'm pro-life. That means I believe that everyone has a right to exist on the planet. I think people deserve to live. And at the end of the day,
And parents also deserve to try to fight for their child.
absolutely. And here's the thing: if you don't want your kid using the program, then don't use the program. But don't you dare try to stop me from saving somebody else's kid that wants their kid to live.
I want to know. Let me do a tangent.
Yeah.
How much did this program cost the state of Utah?
I could probably get that answer. Less than you'd think.
No, I just give
Less
me
than $1 million, less than 5 million, less than 10
So
million.
I'll tell you where the cost comes in. The cost comes in with paying the LCSWs. And so
I
because
don't know
they,
what that is.
Yeah.
What's
okay, so a licensed clinical social worker
okay.
is the therapist, and they're
Well,
the ones who
let me
answer
ask you
the
a
phones.
question. Was the state of Utah paying for LCSWs anyway?
Yes.
Okay,
And
so
they had
Moot
people.
point. Maybe they had to
people
double that.
yes, and let me just tell you, we have increased the number of people significantly, and so that has increased. But let me
Can I throw out a different thought?
yeah.
How much does a
Does an LCSW get paid? Peanuts.
no?
It's a shame.
Well, that's actually a good question. What
How
what are we paying?
no. How much does a funeral cost?
Do you know, in terms of dollars, that's one question, but in terms
No,
of the
seriously.
devastation to a family,
Yeah.
I would say it's incalculable.
Yeah,
Like, I don't
but
I don't know how you recover from losing a child.
I would honestly say that life-saving programs like this are kind of a moot point. Even if we had to go so far as to say we're going to charge you $5 to download this.
Well,
And
so
recover
we
it.
don't.
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
But that'd be fine as far as I'm concerned. That'd be a. If
Well-
I had a teenage son, I know I would be diving on top of this.
Yeah.
Like
well,
crazy.
let me just tell you, my core philosophy is, if it's in the Constitution, you have to do it. If it's prohibited by the Constitution, you can't do it.
Uh-huh.
Look, the rest of the stuff we can talk about, but by and large, stop taking my stuff and leave me alone. Right? That's kind of my core philosophy. It's why
Don't hurt people and don't
yeah.
take their stuff.
It's why
I
I'm a
like it.
Republican. But here's the thing. The
When are you going to tell
core-
the rest of the Republicans?
Yeah, I'm working on that. So the core, I've lost my place because now
Sorry.
I'm thinking of smart aleck remarks.
I know.
You'll get an opportunity, I'm
I'll,
sure.
I'll come back. What was I saying? I was talking about.
You were talking about
core.
the middle
Okay,
ground.
So here's the core. The core purpose of government, the reason that we let government take our stuff in the first place and boss us around in the first place,
It's because they told
is
us
to
from birth that we
preserve
have to.
life, liberty, and the right to keep and own property. Now, let's be clear. We're not providing those rights. Those are God-given rights. But we do have to take active steps to preserve them. It's why I support law enforcement, because we have to preserve our right to life. But it's also why I support raising the bar on law enforcement, having transparency and oversight of law enforcement, because otherwise we don't have a right to liberty, right? And I think I've very successfully balanced those two things. I mean, I have support from law enforcement, and yet I'm the guy who ran the bill on body cams. I'm the guy who ran the bill to rein in civil asset forfeiture. I'm the guy who ran the bill for clean slate. So I don't know if you know much about this, but we have data that proves that if you've kept your nose clean for X amount of time based on criminal charges, you are actually less likely to commit the offense again than the average person.
Yeah.
And
we need to
so
wash
why aren't
felonies
people,
away.
Yeah. Why aren't people getting
Why are you
expunged?
saying-
It's because it's too complicated.
If you weren't already married, I'd propose.
Well,
Dude,
I do.
seriously,
I
no.
do some good work.
You talk
I do some
about
good work, know.
civil asset forfeiture is a big
He loves
a big
that word.
point of mine. And also you said something. You
Yep.
said life, liberty, and property, which
Yep.
is the proper way it's supposed to be.
That was the
prior-
original statement.
The-
Do you know why they changed it?
because Hamilton wanted to rip everyone off. Yeah.
Nope. It's because they didn't want it to be used to justify slavery,
Ooh.
which Thomas Jefferson called a hideous blot. And he said, if we leave this, if we leave property, then they could be seen as a constitutional guarantee.
Oh.
And that is why
A lot of people don't recognize that Jefferson actually tried to limit slavery
He did.
7
Yeah.
times
Yep.
while he was not federally.
Yep.
Always on the state level, because back then
no, he was a federalist.
federal
Yeah.
didn't matter.
Yeah.
State level did. When he was in
Yeah.
the Virginia Senate and also as governor, he tried limiting slavery or relaxing the laws on being able to release your slaves, because in Virginia, if you owed anybody a dime, you couldn't release your slaves.
Right,
And
right.
he built Monticello and hold a lot of money.
Well, anyway, to get back, look, the reason that I'm doing this stuff, the reason that mental health and crisis response is so important is I don't think we would ever in a million years tolerate the government not providing police, fire, and ambulance. We would lose our ever-loving minds. So why do we let them get away with not providing mental health crisis response?
And that's just mental health crisis. It's such a small fee, and granted, it's a nominal impact. It's an impact of what, 1 in probably 150 kids, maybe even less than that.
Okay, let me just tell you real
But it's
quick.
a huge impact when
let me,
it does.
No, let
impact.
me just tell you, it's most
Most kids,
are struggling, man.
but I mean,
Like kids are struggling. Okay, let me just tell you, we have what 600,000 K-12 kids in the state of Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, we had more than 1 million communications going back and forth.
were they
through UT.
repeat communications?
Yes, absolutely.
Because if
But
you're
here-
talking
look,
text, I've seen kids text.
yeah.
They will send 4 texts to get 6 words across.
So, but here's the thing. Look, I don't care if the kid uses it every
No,
single
no,
day.
I agree. I
That's
want
365.
I want a
That's
measurable.
365 times.
But what I would like to see out of that is a measurable impact of how many kids are in crisis, a percentage
Yeah.
of kids
So-
in crisis.
So the other number that I can give you is something called active rescues. Now, most of the kids who reach out, they just need a little help,
Oh yeah,
right? And they stabilize right away, right? And the concern.
Well, that's
the
why you have
concern about
professionals
bypassing-
on
yeah.
the other line.
The concern about bypassing parents, let me just tell you why that's not true. The very first thing they try to do is drive home to these kids, you're going to need more help. Can we loop your parents in? Like I will tell you right now, that is their first goal, is to get these kids connected with their parents.
Well, and not just that, but this is 11 through 24, right? So there's a 5-year age group in there that if they need to go anywhere to receive that follow-up help,
Yeah.
are going to need to get their parents
well,
or
technically there's no age limit. So
yeah,
Yeah.
a trusted
younger kids
adult,
could use it. Yeah.
a trusted adult involved to drive them there.
Actually, it would have to be a parent because they can't provide treatment without the parents.
Well, I
Right.
mean, like if
So like
they're
they
going to,
can they
Is
can
that
counsel
up to
them.
18 or 17?
Yeah, they can counsel them over the phone.
I mean, the
but as
follow
far
up,
as,
like
as
if
far as
they're
any
going
kind of
to.
follow up, you can't do follow up without parental
Well, I mean, if
consent.
you're going to go to a hospital and say, "Hey, I'm in crisis," most kids, let's look at it at Harder Tooele.
But the hospital is going to identify that kid. They're going to find out who the
And
kid
they
is.
are,
They're not going to
yes.
treat without finding out.
But
who they
I'm just
are.
saying,
and then they're going to get the parents
Just to
involved.
get them there, we don't have
Yeah.
a taxi company
So-
out here. Or
So let me tell you one of the exciting things here. So most of the time we stabilize the kid, but an average of about 730 times a year. Okay, so roughly twice a day, we will have what's called an active rescue. An active rescue is where the therapist determines that the patient is not stabilizing, that the patient will not be okay if we hang up the phone. And under those circumstances, we will actually use location services, and we will send a team, and we will recover that child, and we will take them somewhere safe. Now, you want actual demonstrable proof that this is saving lives? I would argue $750 a year.
Yeah, that's twice a day.
$730 a year, roughly twice a day.
Yeah.
Those are solid numbers. Those are hard numbers. Those are people
and those may be circumstances where the parents aren't someone like that.
Look, we have had direct interventions here in Tooele where a friend sent in a tip. And I don't want to give details because, somebody might know details of this case. But I will just tell you, the friend sent in a tip that said, I was communicating with my friend. They said this, and it was a code phrase that the therapists immediately zoned in on and knew that kid was not okay. And they said, my friend said this on social media. Now they're not answering their phones. And so while communicating through texts, they were able to get on the phone with Tooele Dispatch. They were able to get an EMS unit responded to that house within minutes. The whole family was home. They were able to resuscitate that child and save that life because a friend used the Safe UT app and texted in that my friend's not okay.
That's a kid, and you got to think about it.
The whole family was home.
But how long would it take for someone to, sorry for crass language, but expire? You give someone who's intent on that, and they saved his life.
Yeah.
That's outstanding.
So here's the thing. Like we can talk mental health for days, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's what's going to decide this race. There's at the end of the day, there are people who think I've been there too long. And my response is, you've been there too long when you stop doing good. You've been there too long when you stop sticking up for people. So I don't know if you remember that terrible tax bill that we passed right before the world ended, that doubled the tax on food.
Yeah, I remember that.
Now, if you're wondering why would Republicans vote for that, it's because on one hand, we did all this good stuff, but we paid for all these other tax breaks by doubling the tax on food. Now, I'll tell you why they did it. And it was
a tax that would almost specifically hit median households and below because of the way
sugary goods and stuff like that.
No, it
wasn't a sugar tax. It was a tax on any unprepared food. So milk, eggs, bread. Bad
so
news,
those
in my
who
opinion.
couldn't.
But I'll tell you why they wanted to do it. They wanted to do it because it's good for the government. Okay, and let me just be clear. It's not about the amount of revenue. It's about the stability of revenue. So when times are good, people buy everything. When times are bad, what do they buy? Only
Just food.
And so if we double the tax on food, then we increase the stability so that we still have money coming in when times are tough. And it makes sense. If your primary concern is the convenience of the government, that argument makes sense.
The government to still have a healthy budget that they don't have to.
There you go.
They don't have to come out on the news and say, "Hey, we had to restrict this program."
We had to do. But so to counteract the regressive nature, they came out and said, "But here's what we're going to do to make it so that there's less impact on low-income families. We're going to create this new government program, where you can go and you can apply for waivers. Like these are people that." Like we're talking about the people with the least amount of sophistication to navigate government bureaucracy.
You're in the same situation that you were when you were a construction worker trying to stand up for the cigarette smokers.
I always do. Look, it's not about cigarettes. I hate cigarettes. I hate smoking, but I love people.
Well, and that's
the bottom line.
Those were your guys. You actually
but even if they weren't, it's a matter of principle. I have to stand up for the people that nobody else cares about. I have to stand up for the people that nobody else is standing up for.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan. We have an institution called the DABC here in Utah.
Yep.
And I refer to it as a very socialist institution. It is government run business, and it runs out free market business. Where do you stand with
Well, and it
You
this?
taxes
know,
it
let
actually
me-
hold on, let me point to Manitowoc Cellars. We had a wine cellar here in Tooele, and they are destroyed because of the DABC.
So you
I've
mentioned
got some of their bottles up above behind that flag right there. Let me pull one down.
A memorial to the free market.
Do you know, you mentioned socialism, and I want to bring this up. One of my earliest fights that really impacted me a lot was we were talking about equalizing education funding. So I don't know if you know this. We equalize what we call the weighted pupil unit, where we go through and we say every kid across the entire state, no matter who they are, no matter what they are, they get X amount per kid, right? And so we have one of the most fair and equitable funding distributions in the nation. Where we are terrible is with property tax. So you look at the amount of property tax collected and applied to schools in Park City versus Tooele, it's like 4-1.
Really?
Yeah, super unfair.
Man, it makes me feel good because I went to school in Grantsville and they smoked Park City in football all the time.
So there was a bill.
Not
I think
chess
I want
club,
to say it was my first or second year, and two conservative juggernauts were just going at each other. And on one hand, it was Margaret Dayton, and I don't know if you remember her, but she was a conservative giant. And on the other hand was Howard Stevenson, and he was a conservative giant. And they were just beating heads together over whether or not we should be equalizing property tax for our kids. And so Howard's argument was it's not fair that kids in one area don't have the same resources as kids in another area because of arbitrary school district lines drawn by the state. Margaret's argument was, but if you take money from the rich and give it to the poor, that's socialism. And all of a sudden, Howard stops because she dropped the socialism word. She says, well, that's socialism. And he says, you're right.
The whole school system is socialism.
And I was like, whoa. Did he just give up the fight? What's happening next? And Howard says, you're right. It is socialism. It is socialism as required under Utah Constitution Article 10 that says we shall have a fair and equitable education system available to all children at no cost to them. So you're right, Margaret. It is socialism.
No cost to the children,
No cost to the children.
but the
It is-
parents.
well, that's a longer conversation. But what he said was, at the end of the day, it is socialism as required by the Constitution of the state of Utah, which we swore to uphold and defend. And there's only one thing worse than socialism, and that is inequitable socialism. And I was like, damn, Howard, like,
Man, he come in like
mercy,
an angel.
mercy. Okay, you won. Stop. And that from that moment on, I became an advocate for school funding equalization. And believe it or not, we've actually made things better. We have been able, I mean, you can't really steal from the rich and give to the poor, but what we did instead was we said, we're going to set aside half of all new education income, and it's going to start funding at the lowest property tax schools. So everybody still gets the same from half of new money. So we didn't take any money away. We're just the lowest property tax area, which starts with Tintic and works its way up to Tooele. They get more money than everybody else.
So it goes Tintic, Tooele, everyone else. I dig it.
I could pull up a map if you want.
Yeah.
I mean, you could Google it, but that would distract me. and
No,
then I'd
but
start
Tintic,
staring
no,
at
I
the screen.
recognize.
But there's certain
But no, I
areas.
like
yeah.
that where you say,
Look, you
we're
keep
gonna-
what you have, but half of new revenue will go to fund the inequity. And I fought so hard for that. And that is actually one of the things that I am most proud of, because, again, it addresses those inequities.
I feel like our education system is not a problem at the funding it level. The problem is at the and I'm not disparaging teachers because they've been taught this, but it seems like academics is taking a back seat to activism in public education. And they've been taught that. The teaching schools has taught academics or has taught activism as their thing, you know. And it seems like every year our education return goes down as our investment goes up every year. And that's not just Utah, that's nationally. And I think that's because of how we've been
we're focused on genderism and
it's how we've been teaching teachers.
Do you want to hear
the activism of the day right now? It's you know, whether you're LGBTQA plus, that's the activism of the day. When 2 years ago, the activism of the day was minority, and a few years before that, it was this. And I feel that our teaching system, our administration, our teachers have fallen into this trap where they've got to support the activism of the day.
Yeah.
When we've got to clear from Socrates on how to teach math.
Well, let's be clear.
Writing.
Let's be clear. At the risk of doing, both sidisms, look, both sides do it.
Oh no!
We now have an outrage mob. Now, on the left, we call the outrage mob woke. Mm-hmm. What do you call the outrage mob on the right? Because it exists, right? You've seen it. If you don't get whipped up over this thing,
it's the Laverne library thing.
What do you call it though?
Anti-woke, I guess.
What do you call the right?
No,
the right side outrage mob.
But you've got to understand, this right outrage mob are parents who saw some of these books come home and they were like,
"Oh, let me be clear. No. I'm not saying they're an outrage mob. Look, I voted for the bill that says you can't have porn in school libraries."
No, okay? and I agree.
Let me tell you what put me over the edge on that particular bill, because honestly, I could have gone either way. Right up until I saw the handout that legislative rules wouldn't allow to be distributed.
What was the handout that?
Yeah, so Senator Weiler, Captain Pornzar for the state of Utah, he put together a list of the types of things that were available in junior high and high school libraries.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that.
Now again, we're not talking public libraries. We're talking those. So
I kind of think the Laverna library thing has jumped the shark because now they're going after city libraries.
Okay, so I'm not sure what that specific case is.
Laverna library, it's a Utah. It's the Utah. Laverna was it seemed like that's where it boiled over, where parents started going after this. What they considered pornography, whether it was pornography or not.
I'm not talking about city
and it's
libraries.
In Laverna,
I'm talking about that's junior high and high school libraries.
They call it the Laverna movement because that's where they went after the state school libraries. But they're starting to boil in on city libraries. I think city libraries should be complete free speech. Every book, any book.
I feel the same way. And that was the argument that I made.
I've always argued that schools are a place where you're forced by law to send your children or find a substitute. So by that stance, you should have total control over what those children. Those children should never be subjected to anything that would take away from the culture of your family.
Right, and so that was my argument. And I actually made this argument on the Senate floor as people were saying, "Oh, you're banning books." We're not banning books. You can buy it in a bookstore. Yep. You can get it for your own child from the city library. This isn't a question of banning books. This is a question of whether or not it is appropriate for a school of public instruction to be providing these things to your students and your children without your knowledge and consent.
100%.
And I was perfectly prepared to vote against that bill right up until I saw the stuff that legislative rules would not allow to be distributed on the Senate floor. So Let me make sure I
So
understand.
there was some books that you couldn't see.
Oh yes.
So
And
there were books.
So Todd Weiler went and he took images from these graphic novels
There were
that
books.
had graphic depictions of sex acts
There were books in say junior high
in a junior high in
that
Davis.
were outlawed on the Senate floor. On
Yes.
That'll tell you something.
So that
Wow.
so legislative
That's
rules
impressive.
would not allow Senator Weiler to distribute to senators to see what we were voting on. They weren't allowed to pass that out.
Did you
And
avert
yet-
your eyes?
And yet we had them available in junior high and high school libraries. And look, I'm not a prude, okay? I think that you have the right to educate your kid on things that you want educated.
Exactly.
But I also think you have a right for your kid to not have sex forced down their throats without your
Exactly.
consent and without you knowing what they're looking at.
What about what
1000%.
about hormone blockers? I feel like we're also trying to put hormone blockers down the kids' throats in schools if they have a moment where
Well,
they
how
put their
else you-
GI Joes on the My Little Ponies.
Are you going to get suppository hormone blockers? How else you going to get them down?
Oh, they'd love that.
It's got to be down the throat. But no, that is a whole different issue. I think that's a
That is,
fight.
I was going to say that is a long conversation.
That is a fight that is far away from Utah as well. Isn't
Well,
it?
here's
Please
the
tell
thing.
me it's far away
Here's
from
the thing.
Utah.
We
Don't tell
have-
me it's here.
We have very, very strict rules on when it can happen. Like you have to see a therapist for like 2 years. A second therapist has to agree.
So we can
The
delay
parents
that
have to
stuff
be-
until they're at least
the parents
12.
have to be involved. And then like a surgeon has to approve, and you can't do any surgeries until you're 18. Like people.
So Utah's doing it right. All right, good. Glad
Well,
to hear it.
let me be clear. It is absolutely possible that I'm wrong.
I don't care if the little boy wants or the little girl wants to dress in different clothes and present as different. I'm 1,000% for that. I am totally against prior to the age of 18 doing any medical change that is going to affect the rest of their life. Because prior to 18,
Yeah.
what's between their ears. All right. I've got a saying. My nieces will tell you this. I say it to them all the time. There is nothing dumber on earth than a teenage girl. And there's nothing shittier
I would
on
say a teenage boy.
no, shittiest animal on earth. And it's got to be that way because there wouldn't be humans if it wasn't the case. Because only the dumbest thing on earth would kiss the shittiest thing on earth. And if it wasn't for that dichotomy, there would be no more humans. Because, 80% of us is made in that window of the dumbest and the shittiest thing on earth.
I don't know, man.
He's not a biology teacher.
No, it's a fact.
I'm not
it's
a
a fact.
biologist.
1,000% fact. 1,000%. Dumbest and shittiest things on earth. And they have to be that way. The girl may be able to answer every math lesson in class and whatever else. She's still the dumbest thing on earth. And he may love his grandma and he's still the shittiest thing on earth. I guarantee it. In that window, that 14 to 19, that's just what they are.
Yeah.
But they have to be that way. God made us. I'm not a religious person, but God made us that way so that there'd be more of us. Because He knew if He didn't, there would be no more.
It was the
humans.
most evolutionary, advantageous
It had to
way
be.
to
Has to be.
reproduce
So-
society.
So we have a 1-year-old baby at home. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna have to wrap up here.
Okay.
But let's
Give us your spiel.
Let's close with
Yeah.
this. At the end of the day, I don't want to do this forever.
Okay.
People all the time will ask me, "Oh, why do you want to do this?" I'm like, "Didn't say want to. Said will." I did this because I couldn't find anybody better.
What kind of construction did you do?
Specifically, I did low voltage. So basically, anything not regulated. I did access control, gate operators, card systems. I did biometric scanners.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
fancy.
No, you did. You did the high tech
Cameras.
stuff.
Yeah, these super fancy
Yeah.
stuff. Sometimes. Sometimes the gates were mostly mechanical. That was fun.
But yeah, but what I mean by that is you didn't wire in a place, but I would like to think of it as you did kind of security and operation systems.
Well, I'll tell you, my personal expertise was troubleshooting.
Okay.
That has always been like an obsession of mine. Like, do you remember the game Mastermind? That was my favorite game as soon as I was old enough to not eat the pieces.
How old are you?
I am now 45. 45.
You lose count, right?
So you're
lose
right
count.
close to what I am, but yeah.
So for me, it's about figuring out how is a system supposed to be operating?
Mm-hmm.
How is it operating? And then how do we get it back to optimal? That is just my jam. Like I want things to work. I want things to function, and I want things to be better. And let me tell you, right now, things are not better in the legislature than when I started.
Really?
I can't leave things worse than I found them. So that's issue number one. And issue number two is this 988. I can't overstate what a big deal this is. And I don't, you know what, I am.
So 988 is
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw a little salt on your last guest. I overheard her make a comment about Chris Stewart not getting anything done. Let me just tell you right now. Chris Stewart got 988 done.
Now 988 is going to be like the 911 for mental health
is
crisis.
911 for mental health crisis. It is the single biggest thing that will happen in mental health crisis response ever.
Okay.
It is. I mean, think about a world if we didn't have 911.
Well, let's.
Are you kidding me?
I'm gonna pull up the phone number, 1-800-273-8255. I want everyone to remember that if you're in mental health crisis, and especially teach it to your kids, because pre-30-year-old is the one of the major danger marks for suicide.
Yeah, change that to 988?
988.
But 988 would be quick. Now you can
it's like
also
911. It's like 911, but it's 988.
Yeah. Now you can
so here's how
also
it's gonna
call
work.
911 if you're having a mental health crisis. It's just a crapshoot on
but
whether the
that's
law
the
enforcement
problem.
officer is.
That's the problem. Are they trained on CIT? Are they, do they co-dispatch with an LCSW? And the answer is probably not.
You're saying a lot of acronyms that even I don't understand.
Yes. Well, and here's the thing. That's why you want me to go and represent you, is because I do know all of these things, and I do understand all of these things.
And you know these things.
And the world will be a better place if I continue to serve for the next 4 years.
And you know all these
don't.
things not because you're a health care provider or a mental health provider.
But because somebody has to know it.
You know these things because you initially started out, knew a family who had a crisis, and that got you involved. And because of that, you researched and sought this out. And I like that.
And that's the thing. Look, there is no one in the legislature right now, with the possible exception of Steve Ellison, that knows this stuff like I do. And I'll tell you, there's certain areas where Steve is better than I am, and that is the bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
The what's the word? I don't know if you know this, but brain fog is a real thing that happens after you have COVID, and sometimes words pop out of your head.
I've had
administration. That's the word I'm looking for.
And a beer in this thing.
Steve Ellison is a genius when it comes to the administration and the bureaucracy and the funding. I will tell you right now, 90% of all of the funding that we got for mental health services has been because of Steve Ellison. That dude is a big damn hero.
He knows how to pull it down, huh?
But here's the thing. Like, I've been in suicide crisis. I have struggled with depression from the time I was 11 years old. I lost one of my closest friends to suicide in high school and struggled with suicide ideation myself ever since. Even as recently as last year, I was having a hard time.
Well,
and there is nobody that understands crisis systems like I do. There is no one that is more passionate. There is no one who is going to fight harder to save your kids, to save your families than I will. Now, add to that, I have also intently and intensively studied the Constitution, and I have this crazy idea that the government should stop taking our stuff and leave us alone. I'm like a
favorite
madman.
We need to stop right there.
That is a good wrap up. And so, look, at the end of the day, I did not get signatures for this race.
Mm-hmm.
I have left my hands entirely on the fate of the delegates. And if I am able to secure 60%,
only we knew a delegate.
If I can get 60% of the delegates at convention, then we're done, and I can get back to work. And I know, God, that sounds so arrogant. You know, oh, you don't want to talk to the people. No, I do. It's why I didn't get signatures. It's why I'm talking to delegates. I do believe that an elected official has a moral obligation to be accountable, to stand up, to answer for their actions. And sometimes you get into silly season, right? You get into, I have 3 opponents. All 3 say that they're more conservative than I am. I don't know how that could be. You know, I've got a conservative voting record, and right now, in my personal opinion, the most conservative thing you do is you shut your mouth and you get to work.
Well,
and you get some things done.
My big thing isn't conservative or liberal. Mine's liberty-oriented voting. That's all I'm about. I'm about liberty, taking responsibility upon yourself. But anyways, to close it out,
and stop using the power of the government to force people
that's right.
to do what you want them to do.
That's right. Hey,
and punish people who don't think the way you do.
No means no, government.
So
no
Dan,
means no.
Dan, circle back to that question about the DABC.
Oh, Dave's hung on.
I'm a pit bull on this one.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan.
So
you can't get away from that one.
Yeah. So I'll tell you where I struggle. In theory and in principle, privatization is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And when we passed the law to go to 0.05,
mm-hmm.
DUIs dropped. You know, I had a really, really intelligent
Shocking,
friend
I
of
know.
mine.
I know.
I had a really intelligent friend of mine who was not LDS, was a drinker, was a defense attorney, and made the argument to me that we should pass a not a drop law. And I said, how can you possibly support that? How can you possibly support DUI with any measurable alcohol? And he said, I'll tell you why. Because we set people who drink up to fail. We tell you, this is back when it was 0.08. He says, you're legal if you're 0.08. Well, how are you supposed to know if you're 0.08? Because the reality is, how much can you drink and still be legal to drive?
Yeah.
And the answer is, it depends.
It depends on what you ate that day.
What are you drinking?
How big
what
are
did you
you?
eat that day?
Yeah.
What are your genetics? Did you nurse it or shotgun it? Did you mix drinks?
Was the sun shining that day?
Was the sun shining that day? How's your vitamin D levels? So you literally are asking a person who has been ingesting alcohol, and let's be honest.
I just want to say I've been drinking alcohol for a couple hours now. I'm very competent drunk.
There is some level of impairment. And one of the very first things that gets impaired is your ability to tell how impaired you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're now asking these people to gamble.
But how would the DABC help aid in controlling that?
I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the day, we do have a compelling state interest in diminishing DUIs.
Sure, but how does the DABC control that? Because there's no reason why we couldn't have a alcohol stores are closed on Sunday without the DABC.
Right.
Or
So-
alcohol stores
Right.
must shut down at 8 p.m. because of the DABC. The hours are from 11 to 8.
Right.
The issue we have with that is that it's under state control, which causes an extra, what is an 18% tax right
Well,
off the top.
let's be clear.
Which
Let's be clear.
destroyed
That is a sin tax.
which destroyed this
Yeah.
company. This is a Tooele company, a guy that shot his shot, who made his attempt at a passion of his own. And because we have a communist, because that isn't socialist, this is a communist fucking organization, destroyed a guy taking his chance.
Yeah.
And I don't see how the DABC controls that, because you can still have state laws that control that, which even then I think is stupid and ridiculous. And also on top of that,
Yeah. So
may even
here's-
cause more harm.
Here's the thing for me. At the end of the day, I wish that I could go with my gut and just say we should privatize alcohol.
I would like to see a study
and
on.
I will say that sin taxes suck.
Well,
Charging an extra tax because we don't like what you're doing sucks.
Sure.
And I will say that outright. Here's the challenge. There is data. And obviously I don't have it
But
on me.
what data can Utah
there
have
is data that shows
for the DABC, which was
that-
kicked off in 1930?
so we have data that shows that control states like Utah and using the control methods like the DABC do in fact decrease the amount of
It could.
violent episodes.
Another thing I'd like to see is, do we have more binge drinking on Saturday nights, because we know Sunday's inaccessible?
Well, I see a lot of people
That's a good
driving to the
question.
store
I don't
drunk.
have the answer to that.
I see a lot of people driving to the store drunk because they can't have an app on their phone to have the beer delivered to them. So, I mean,
Yeah, so let
It
me
sounds like
be clear.
bullcrap to me
Let me
when-
be clear.
when-
I do think that we have some really stupid alcohol laws. Mm-hmm. Like if you can have
Because I would say Utah's a kind of a moot argument because of the Mormon culture. And I mean, the only way you're going to get a Mormon drunk is if you separate him from all other Mormons. We know this. But no, anyways, we have the Mormon culture that allows, that has a good value that keeps them from drinking a lot. So we can't measure ourselves against ourselves like that. I think whenever possible, let freedom reign.
Yeah.
And then draw back. But our alcohol laws come from prohibition, which was a failed fucking program.
Right,
we
right,
all know
right.
it was a complete failure. It caused the highest murder rates the U.S. had ever seen. And it failed. Mormons,
Yeah.
Not just
So-
Mormons, a lot of places.
So-
Where they make Bourbon County, what is it, Kentucky, is a dry county.
yeah.
That's crazy to hear.
We've got to wrap up because we've got like I
you
mentioned
got
we've got a
one
1 year old home. But here's what I'll leave you with. I absolutely agree that we do not that a lot of our liquor laws don't make sense. And I will tell you right now, I would vote to make a lot of them more reasonable. I don't think I could support getting rid of the DABC until and unless I see data that shows
How
that
are we
it
gonna get
will
that
not
data?
have. We have studies that are done annually. Like we have
studies
have
done
audits.
annually on Utahns in Utah, and
Yes, that
we've
is
been
true.
through that.
Yeah.
We would have to say peel off a county.
funded by the DABC.
It's another good
studies are
point.
probably
We're
funded by
going
the
before the government for the government to prove that the government done wrong.
And you know
Well,
what?
except again, to be fair, we do have auditors.
Well, sure,
And yes, they're
sure.
government auditors,
and that's
but
another government
they
person.
actually-
I would.
Have you met John Dougal?
Well, we need to peel a county off.
Have you met John Dougal?
I haven't.
Okay. The dude abides.
Sure, but we need to.
The dude abides.
And that's great, but what is he measuring against? Is my cotton whiter than your cotton? We need to peel a county off. Pick Duchesne County, out in the middle of nowhere, and
Why you
it's
gotta pick on
already
Duchesne?
drunk.
I got a lot of friends in Duchesne.
Great, I love Duchesne County, beautiful county.
They get liberated,
But
is what you're saying?
or pick Tooele off and say, you know what, we're going to do a 5-year study. We're going to privatize the one liquor store in the whole damn county. One liquor store. That's another thing to think about. Is you're making it so that if someone lives in Grantsville
Yeah.
and wants to get running
No, we
up
should-
on a
you
Saturday
should-
night.
You should absolutely be able to do deliveries. Like you should absolutely.
It's not just deliveries I love, but what about the weird hours? What about
Yeah, I don't know.
the extra cost prohibitiveness? What about people will go there and binge buy? And me, I'll tell you what, I've never walked out of that liquor store with less than 3 bottles. I'm not even a liquor drinker. What about a guy who shot his shot? Going to make some revenue for Utah and some taxes for all you Democrats out there. You know, someone you could molest with your IRS and failed because we laid an extra 20. I think it come out to be like an extra 21% tax.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned, it's those sin taxes. They're taxes that are imposed on people for things that we don't want them to do,
Sure.
and they suck, and I hate them. It's the
I wish
same-
we
it's
had
the
one for
same as-
McDonald's.
It's the same as a cigarette tax.
Yeah.
25,000% interest on a Big Mac or something for everyone in line at the Tooele McDonald's. I don't know.
And use that to pay for diabetes
Guns.
related.
For guns. Force guns on everyone.
Yep.
What do we have to do in Utah to make a city that makes it mandatory every male over the age of 18 owns a firearm?
Honestly, I would argue that violates liberty.
Yeah, I would too.
It's like the
but-
DABC.
Because you know what? Look, to bring this back to mental health, some people shouldn't be carrying.
Probably a good point.
Some
You
people
know.
shouldn't be carrying.
Well, you could
So,
you could make the argument
I
some
will-
people shouldn't be carrying, and that's why everyone should be carrying.
I will tell you.
Maybe.
That you know I don't want to get off down another rabbit hole, but
You got a 1-year-old at home.
The vast majority of firearm violence in Utah is self-harm.
Yeah, against themselves.
And look, there are some people who just should not carry.
Yep. The only thing that beats it is accidental self-harm in Utah.
And at the end of the
I don't
night,
think that's true.
No, you think it's beating accidental?
I don't think that's true.
It might be, yeah.
First off, I don't believe in accidental. I believe in negligent.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Nah.
I mean, properly trained, properly executed, you don't have
Mm-hmm.
accidents. You have negligent incidences,
Avoidable.
absolutely preventable with proper education and proper safety protocols.
Delivered
but
in
I will
schools.
just tell you, look, I'm 100% pro Second Amendment, but to use the power of the government to force people to engage in the Second Amendment, I don't know.
That was just a
man.
funny
I don't
question.
know, man.
I'm against
know, man.
government force totally.
I don't think the government should force you to do anything except stop taking our stuff and leave us alone.
How would it be? Speaking
All
to
right,
you,
we gotta
IRS.
wrap up.
But yes, hey, everyone, Daniel Thatcher.
Senate District 11.
Yeah,
That's us in Tooele, guys.
That was a
And
big.
gals.
That was a big positive message on.
That's actually pretty much everybody except Grantsville and Stansbury Park.
And Tooele has had a couple of impacts in just the last month with suicide, and so this is an important thing. So everyone, I like the message of protecting people, and remember that number. I'm going to flash it up on the screen again and announce it again. 1-800-273-8255. I want to thank Senator Thatcher for coming on.
Soon, it'll be 988.
Yeah,
That'll save
988.
a lot of lives.
And I can't stress enough. Chris Stewart. Chris Stewart was the one who made that happen on a national level.
I think that is really amazing. And it'll have the same like data collection that 911 has.
Yep.
Geolocation, pull in a whole bunch of stuff.
Geolocation. It will essentially replace the National Lifeline, which means it will also replace the Veterans Suicide Hotline. 988 will be the
That'll be
911
fantastic.
of mental health.
I like
There's nothing bigger.
If only there was a way that you could, for the youth, for the teenagers, if it could gather the information and pop up dad's phone number, mom's phone number, grandma's, grandpa's. I don't know how they could do that, but that would be an awesome thing to be able to populate that, because if you could get that information and send a mass text out to everyone and get all their family resources right then and there in on it.
Yeah, I think
Not
I think
to interrupt your-
Yeah, I think that probably would not work simply because the kid may or may not want to include,
And we don't know how.
everybody.
Yeah.
And typically, what's going to happen is you got to get the.
I think
parents
generally if you could hit grandma, that'd be the ticket though. I just
All
want to
right.
throw that out there.
involved. Well, let's leave
Anyways,
it with Grandma.
Daniel Thatcher, thank you for coming on. Everyone, he's running for out here in Tooele. This won't apply to you Grantsville people, but
Actually, I have one precinct in Grantsville.
Really?
And one precinct in Stansbury Park, and we didn't talk about redistricting tonight, but
we
it
didn't.
was-
Oh,
Well, we're
you
gonna have
can
to
come
have
on again,
ridiculous.
Dan.
It was
yeah,
ridiculous.
we need to have you on more because
It
this
was ridiculous.
this is a spicy conversation, and I dig it. I like spicy. All right, everyone, have a good. We'll be back tomorrow night. Humana, we got more people to chat with. It is that time of the year, and this is how we do it. And I'll try to stay sober one of these times.
Have a good night to Willa.
Try.